That night, I heard the safe click open in the darkness, and my entire world collapsed in silence. My name is Imani Brooks. I'm 65 years old, and this is the story I kept locked inside my chest for 3 years. Not because I was ashamed, but because some pain runs so deep that speaking it out loud feels like opening a wound that never quite healed. But today, I'm ready. I'm ready because maybe, just maybe, my story can help another mother see the signs I missed. Maybe it can save another family from the devastation that tore mine apart. I need to take you back to before everything shattered. Back when our home smelled like Sunday roast and laughter echoed through the hallways. Back when I believed that love and sacrifice were enough to keep a family whole. Marcus was our only child, our miracle baby, born after 7 years of trying, of prayers whispered in hospital waiting rooms, of hope that refused to die. When the doctor finally placed him in my arms, I looked at my husband Robert and saw tears streaming down his face. We named him Marcus because it meant dedicated to Mars, the god of protection. We wanted him to be strong, to be our warrior. We wanted him to protect the family legacy we were building, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. Robert worked double shifts at the steel mill for 30 years. I cleaned houses during the day and took night classes to become a certified nursing assistant. We weren't rich, but we were proud. We saved every penny we could spare. We kept a silver lockbox in our bedroom closet. Our retirement fund, our emergency cushion, our ticket to finally rest after decades of grinding our bodies into dust for a better future. That lockbox became sacred to us. It held $43,000. Every bill was a memory. The overtime Robert worked through Christmas, the birthday celebrations I skipped to take extra shifts, the vacations we never took, the new car we never bought. It was our dignity in paper form. Marcus grew up knowing about that box. We never hid our struggles from him. We wanted him to understand the value of hard work, of sacrifice, of delayed gratification. "This is our freedom fund," Robert would tell him, his calloused hands resting on Marcus's shoulder. "This is what perseverance looks like." But somewhere along the way, something changed in our son. He was 28 when it happened, still living at home, still finding himself, still making promises about job applications and business ideas that never materialized. I watched him drift through his 20s like a leaf on water, never taking root, never committing to anything real. But he was my son, my miracle. And I believed, God, how I believed, that he just needed time, needed patience, needed unconditional love to find his way. I kept a photograph on my nightstand. It showed the 3 of us at Marcus's high school graduation, our faces glowing with pride and possibility. Every morning, I touched that frame before starting my day, reminding myself that families weather storms together. That frame became my anchor, my symbol of faith in better days ahead. Have you ever loved someone so much that you ignored the warning signs? Have you ever convinced yourself that loyalty meant silence? Tell me your story in the comments, because I've learned that we're never as alone in our pain as we think we are. The night it happened was a Tuesday in October. Robert had just gotten home from his shift, exhausted as always, his back aching from years of heavy lifting. We ate dinner together, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Marcus's favorite. He seemed distracted, kept checking his phone, barely touched his food. I asked him if everything was okay. He smiled at me, that beautiful smile that had melted my heart since he was a baby, and said, "Everything's fine, Mom. Just tired." I believed him. After dinner, Robert fell asleep in his recliner with the TV flickering. I washed the dishes, humming an old hymn my grandmother used to sing. Marcus said he was going out to meet some friends. He kissed my cheek on his way out, and I remember thinking how tall he'd gotten, how much he looked like Robert at that age. Around midnight, I woke to use the bathroom. That's when I heard it, the soft metallic click of our bedroom closet opening. My heart started racing. I knew that sound. I'd heard it 1,000 times over the years, every time we added another bill to our savings, every time we counted our progress toward freedom. I crept to the bedroom doorway and saw Marcus in the dim light, the silver lockbox open in his hands, bills stuffing into a backpack with desperate, trembling fingers. Our eyes met across the darkness, and in that moment, I saw a stranger wearing my son's face. But that night, something happened that changed everything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry out. I just stood there in that doorway, frozen like a photograph, watching my son steal our entire future with hands that I had once guided to write his first letters, to tie his first shoelaces, to fold in prayer. Marcus froze too. The backpack hung from his shoulder, heavy with our dreams converted into cash. For what felt like an eternity, we just stared at each other across that dark bedroom, a chasm wider than any ocean opening between us. I could see his chest rising and falling rapidly, could see the guilt flickering in his eyes, fighting with something else. Desperation, maybe, or defiance. "Mom," he whispered finally, his voice cracking, "I can explain." But I held up my hand, not in anger, not in permission, just in a gesture that said, Don't insult me with lies. Don't make this worse than it already is." Robert stirred in the next room, and panic flashed across Marcus's face. He took a step toward me, and I saw him clearly then, not as my miracle baby, not as the boy I had sacrificed everything for, but as a man who had made a choice, a terrible, selfish, irreversible choice. "Please," he mouthed silently, "please don't wake him." And God forgive me, I didn't. I stepped aside and let my son walk past me. Let him carry our entire life savings out the front door and into the October night. I heard his car engine start, heard the tires on our gravel driveway, heard the sound fade into the distance until there was nothing left but silence and the ringing in my ears. I went back to bed and lay beside Robert, listening to him breathe, knowing that in the morning I would have to break his heart. Knowing that the man who had worked himself to exhaustion for 30 years, who had given up every pleasure and comfort for our family, would wake up to discover that his son, his only son, his legacy, his reason for every sacrifice, had betrayed us in the cruelest way possible. I touched the photograph on my nightstand in the darkness. The glass felt cold under my fingertips. 3 smiling faces, captured in a moment when we still believed the future was bright. I wanted to throw it across the room, to shatter it like Marcus had shattered us. But I didn't. I just held it against my chest and waited for dawn. When Robert woke up, I was making coffee in the kitchen. My hands were steady as I poured his cup, added 2 sugars the way he liked it. He came up behind me and kissed my temple, his morning ritual for 42 years of marriage. "Morning, baby," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Where's Marcus?" I turned to face him, and he must have seen something in my eyes because his smile faltered. "Imani? What's wrong?" I told him. I told him everything, and I watched my husband age 10 years in 10 seconds. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just walked to our bedroom closet like a man in a trance, opened it, saw the empty space where our silver lockbox used to be, and sank down onto the floor. His big, strong shoulders that had carried steel beams and family burdens for decades, began to shake with silent sobs. I sat down beside him and held him while he cried. We stayed like that for hours, holding each other on our bedroom floor, mourning not just the money, but the son we thought we knew, the future we thought we had built, the trust that had been our foundation. "How could he?" Robert kept asking, his voice broken. "How could our boy do this to us?" I had no answer. I still don't. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. Robert moved through our house like a ghost. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't seem to focus on anything. He kept picking up his phone to call Marcus, then putting it down again. He'd walk to Marcus's empty bedroom and just stand there, staring at the unmade bed, the posters still on the walls, the childhood that felt like a lie now. I tried to hold us together. I called the police, but they told us that since Marcus was family and had access to the house, it would be nearly impossible to prosecute. "It's a civil matter," the officer said, his voice flat with indifference. Our devastation was just paperwork to him. I called our bank, changed our accounts, installed new locks on our doors. I moved through the practical necessities like a machine, because if I stopped moving, if I let myself feel the full weight of what had happened, I knew I would collapse. As I tell you this, I wonder where you're listening from. Write your city below so I can feel a little closer to you, because in those dark days, I felt so terribly alone. On the 3rd day, Robert was working in the garage, trying to fix an old lawnmower. I heard a crash and ran outside to find him on the concrete floor, clutching his chest, his face gray as ash. He looked up at me with such confusion in his eyes, such betrayal, and whispered, "It hurts, Imani. It hurts so much." I knew he wasn't just talking about his heart. The ambulance came. The sirens wailed, and I followed them to the hospital, holding that photograph in my purse, praying to a God I wasn't sure was listening anymore. Robert survived the heart attack, but something in him had died that day in the garage. Robert came home from the hospital 2 weeks later with a list of medications as long as my arm and a silence that filled every room like fog. The doctors said he was lucky. The heart attack was moderate, treatable, survivable, but they couldn't prescribe anything for the kind of damage that doesn't show up on an EKG. He moved differently now, slower, more careful, as if his body had become fragile overnight, as if one wrong step might shatter him completely. But it was his eyes that broke me, those eyes that used to light up when he talked about our retirement plans, about traveling to see the Grand Canyon, about finally having time to fish and read and just breathe. Those eyes were empty now. We didn't talk about Marcus. His name became a ghost in our house, present in every silence, haunting every meal we ate at a table set for 2 instead of 3. I packed up his bedroom one afternoon while Robert was at a follow-up appointment. I couldn't look at it anymore, couldn't walk past that open door and see the life our son had abandoned without a backward glance. I found things while I packed, a shoebox full of bills he'd never paid, rejection letters from jobs he'd told us he'd gotten, credit card statements with balances that made my stomach turn. Our boy hadn't just been lost. He'd been drowning, and he'd never let us see it. And when he couldn't keep his head above water anymore, he'd pulled us down with him. I sat on his bed holding those papers, trying to understand when love had stopped being enough, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when the miracle baby we'd prayed for had become a stranger who could look his mother in the eyes while stealing her last hope for peace. That photograph on my nightstand started to feel like evidence of a crime. Every time I looked at it, I saw 3 people who didn't exist anymore, but I couldn't bring myself to put it away. It was proof that we had been happy once, that the love had been real, even if everything else turned out to be an illusion. Robert went back to work after 6 weeks, against doctor's orders. We needed the money. The hospital bills were piling up, and our safety net was gone. I watched him force himself out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, watched him move through his routines with mechanical precision, and I knew he was killing himself slowly. But what could I say? We were 65 and 67 years old with no savings, no backup plan, and no son to help us if we fell. The steel mill let him go 3 months later. Restructuring, they called it. But I knew the truth. Robert couldn't keep up anymore. His body had been broken by the heart attack, and his spirit had been shattered by Marcus. He came home that Friday afternoon with a cardboard box full of his things and sat down at the kitchen table without a word. I made him tea. I sat across from him, and we stared at each other in the ruins of everything we'd built. "What are we going to do?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. For the first time in my life, I genuinely didn't know how we were going to survive. We started selling things, small things at first, the good china we'd received as wedding gifts, the tools Robert had collected over the years, the jewelry I'd inherited from my mother. Every item that left our house felt like another piece of our dignity walking out the door. But we smiled at the buyers, thanked them politely, and deposited their cash into our nearly empty bank account. I picked up extra shifts at the nursing home where I worked. Robert found odd jobs, yard work, house painting, anything that didn't require heavy lifting. We were old and tired and broken, doing the kind of work we thought we'd left behind decades ago. But we survived, barely. Just barely. At night, I'd lie awake listening to Robert's uneven breathing, feeling the weight of his sadness pressing down on our bed like a physical thing. Sometimes I'd hear him crying softly in the darkness, trying not to wake me. Those were the nights I'd reach for that photograph, trace the outline of Marcus's young face with my finger, and try to remember what hope felt like. 6 months after Marcus left, my sister called to ask if I'd heard from him. "Heard from who?" I asked, my voice flat. She went quiet for a moment, then said, "Imani, baby, he's still your son." I hung up on her. I couldn't explain that the person who stole from us wasn't my son anymore. That person was someone else entirely. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Robert was finally asleep, I'd let myself wonder. Wonder where Marcus was. Wonder if he thought about us. Wonder if he spent that money on something worthwhile, or if he just burned through it like he burned through every opportunity we'd ever given him. Wonder if he knew that his father's heart had literally broken from the pain of his betrayal. I still wonder if I did the right thing by keeping silent that night in the bedroom. What about you? If you saw someone you loved destroying your family, would you sound the alarm, or would you step aside and let the destruction happen? Sometimes, I think my silence that night was the biggest mistake of my life. Other times, I think making noise would have only made the crash louder. Robert started having nightmares. He'd wake up gasping, reaching for me in the darkness, calling Marcus's name like a prayer or a curse. I could never tell which. The doctors added sleeping pills to his regimen. More pills, more copays, more bills we couldn't afford. I became harder. I felt it happening, felt my heart turning to stone one day at a time. The Imani who had believed in unconditional love and second chances and the power of family, that woman disappeared. In her place was someone who understood that some betrayals are too deep to forgive, some wounds too jagged to heal. And then, on a cold Tuesday morning 18 months after he left, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I stared at that phone vibrating on the kitchen counter for 3 rings before I picked it up. Something in my gut told me to let it go to voicemail, to protect myself from whatever was on the other end of that line. But my hand reached for it anyway, muscle memory from a lifetime of answering calls, of being available, of saying yes when I should have said no. Hello? Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice I would have recognized anywhere, even after 18 months of absence, even if 100 years had passed. Mom? My knees went weak. I gripped the counter with my free hand, steadying myself against the wave of emotion that crashed through me. Rage and relief and grief all tangled together like barbed wire around my heart. Mom? It's me. It's Marcus. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat had closed up, and behind my eyes I could see Robert on the garage floor, clutching his chest, could see the empty space in our closet where our future used to be, could see myself at 65 years old scrubbing floors because my son had stolen our dignity along with our money. Mom, please say something, please. His voice cracked, and despite everything, despite the stone I'd built around my heart, I felt it, that old maternal instinct, that primal urge to comfort my child when he's in pain. I hated myself for feeling it. Why are you calling? My voice came out cold, flat, unrecognizable even to myself. I need to talk to you. I need to see you. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. You need. That's funny, Marcus. Because we needed our savings. Your father needed his health. I needed to believe my son was a good man. But what we needed didn't matter much to you, did it? Mom, please. Where's the money, Marcus? Where's our $43,000? Did you spend it all? Did you waste it on whatever trouble you were running from? Did it buy you 18 months of peace while your father's heart literally broke from grief? Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, it's gone, Mom. All of it. I made mistakes, bad mistakes, and now His voice broke completely. Now I have nowhere else to go. There it was. The truth I'd been waiting for, the confirmation of what I'd suspected all along. He hadn't called because he was sorry. He hadn't called because he missed us or because he'd spent 18 months reflecting on what he'd done. He'd called because the money had run out and he needed something else from us. He'd come back to the well one more time, expecting it to still have water after he'd poisoned it. I thought about hanging up. I thought about telling him that he'd made his choice, and now he had to live with it. I thought about protecting Robert from another heartbreak, from the false hope that would surely kill him if Marcus disappointed us again. But instead, I heard myself say, "Where are you?" "I'm at a gas station about 40 miles outside of town." "Mom, I don't have anywhere to sleep tonight. I don't have any money for food. I lost my apartment 2 months ago, and I've been living in my car, but yesterday someone broke into it and took everything I had left. My phone, my laptop, my clothes. I'm calling you from the payphone here. I'm at the end of my rope. Part of me, that hard, protective part that had formed over the last 18 months, wanted to say, "Good. You deserve to suffer. You deserve to know what it feels like to have nothing, to be desperate, to feel the ground disappear beneath your feet. Maybe then you'll understand what you did to us." But I looked across the kitchen at Robert, who was dozing in his chair with a book open on his lap, medication bottles lined up on the side table like little soldiers guarding what was left of his life. And I knew that if Marcus showed up broken and desperate and I turned him away, it would destroy Robert just as surely as the betrayal had. Sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes you can only choose which kind of pain you're willing to carry. "Come home," I said, my voice steady now, cold as December rain. "But Marcus, things are different now. You need to understand that before you walk through that door." "I understand, Mom. I promise. I know what you need. You always need. Come home. We'll talk when you get here." I hung up before he could say anything else. I stood there in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not love, not in the way it used to be, but something else, something calculated and clear and completely unlike the mother I had been. I walked over to Robert and gently touched his shoulder. He startled awake, blinking up at me with those sad, tired eyes. "Who was on the phone?" he asked. I looked down at my husband, this good man who had given me 42 years of faithfulness and love, who had worked his body to ruins for our family, who had nearly died from a broken heart, and I made a decision. "Wrong number," I lied. "Just someone looking for directions." I couldn't tell him yet. Not until I had a plan. Not until I knew exactly what I was going to do when Marcus walked back through our door expecting salvation. That night, I took the photograph from my nightstand and really looked at it for the first time in months. 3 people frozen in happiness, unaware that the foundation beneath them was already cracking. I traced Marcus's face one more time, memorizing the boy he used to be, saying goodbye to the son I'd thought I had. Then I put the frame face down in my drawer and closed it. I spent that night thinking, planning, remembering every self-help book I'd read to the elderly patients at the nursing home, every story of people who'd found strength in their darkest moments, every lesson about boundaries and consequences, and the difference between enabling and loving. By dawn, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Marcus would come home expecting the mother who had always sacrificed, always forgiven, always put his needs above her own. But that mother was gone. Marcus arrived 3 days later, just after sunset. I watched through the kitchen window as his beat-up car pulled into our driveway, sputtering and coughing like it was taking its last breaths. The vehicle looked like it had aged a decade in 18 months. Scratched paint, cracked windshield, one headlight hanging loose like a broken eye. I didn't rush to the door. I didn't call out to Robert, who was in the bedroom watching television. I just stood at that window and watched my son sit in his car for a full 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, gathering courage to face what he'd done. When he finally stepped out, I barely recognized him. The Marcus who had left us was filled out, healthy, carrying the weight of a man who'd never missed a meal. The Marcus standing in our driveway was gaunt, hollow-cheeked, his clothes hanging off his frame like they belonged to someone else. His hair was long and unkempt, his face covered with patchy stubble. He looked like he'd been living rough, like life had chewed him up and spit him out. "Good," that hard voice in my head whispered. "Let him see what consequences look like." But another part of me, that mother's heart that refused to completely die, felt a pang of pain seeing my child so diminished. I crushed that feeling immediately. I couldn't afford softness anymore. Softness had cost us everything. He knocked on the door tentatively, like a stranger asking for shelter. I let him knock 3 times before I opened it. We stood facing each other across the threshold. His eyes, Robert's eyes, the same warm brown that used to look at me with so much love, were red-rimmed and desperate. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "Not yet," I said quietly. "Your father doesn't know you're coming. I haven't told him anything. So before you step through this door, you need to understand something, Marcus. Things have changed. We have changed." "Mom, I'm so sorry." I said not yet. "You'll have plenty of time for apologies." Right now you need to listen." I stepped aside to let him in, and he moved past me carrying a single garbage bag with what I assumed were his remaining possessions. Everything he owned in the world fit in one trash bag. The irony wasn't lost on me. I led him to the kitchen and gestured for him to sit. He sank into the chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore, and I saw his eyes sweep across the room, taking in all the small absences. The empty spaces where we used to have nice things. The microwave we'd sold, the coffee maker that was gone, the bare walls where paintings used to hang. "Mom, what happened? Where's all your—" "Where do you think, Marcus?" My voice was calm, almost pleasant. "We sold it. Everything we could sell. Because your father lost his job after the heart attack, and I'm working double shifts at 65 years old trying to keep us afloat. Because hospital bills don't pay themselves, and neither do the medications that keep your father alive. Because the retirement we spent 30 years building was stolen by someone we trusted, someone we loved, someone we would have given anything to help if he'd just asked instead of taking." Each word landed like a stone, and I watched him flinch with every one. His hands trembled on the table, and tears started rolling down his cheeks, but I didn't stop. He needed to hear this. He needed to understand what his choices had cost. "You want to know about your father? The man who worked himself into dust for you? He had a heart attack 3 days after you left. 3 days, Marcus. The doctors said it was stress-induced. His heart literally broke from what you did. He survived, but something in him died that day. He's not the same man. He'll never be the same man." Marcus buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I was in trouble. I owed people money. Bad people. I thought I could fix it, thought I could pay them back and return your money before you even noticed it was gone. But everything went wrong, and I was scared, and I ran like a coward instead of facing what I'd done." "You were in trouble," I repeated slowly. "So instead of coming to us, instead of trusting us to help you, you destroyed us. You chose to save yourself by sacrificing your parents." I know, and I hate myself for it. Every single day for 18 months, I've hated myself. I thought about coming back 100 times, but I was too ashamed. And then everything fell apart. I lost my job, lost my apartment, lost everything. The universe made sure I paid for what I did. I sat down across from him and looked at this broken man who used to be my little boy. I thought about karma, about how life has a way of teaching lessons whether we're ready to learn them or not. I thought about the version of myself who would have rushed to comfort him, to wrap him in forgiveness and unconditional love. That woman was gone, and I didn't mourn her. The universe didn't do this to you, Marcus. You did this to yourself, and now you're here because you have nowhere else to go. Not because you wanted to make things right, not because you spent 18 months becoming a better person, but because you're desperate, and you think your old mom will take you in like nothing happened. That's not— Don't lie to me anymore. I'm done with lies." I leaned forward, and my voice dropped to something cold and clear as crystal. "You can stay here. I'll give you a roof over your head and food in your stomach. But Marcus, you need to understand something. You are not my son anymore. Not the son I raised, not the son I loved. That boy is dead to me. You're a stranger who happens to share my blood, and you're here on probation. One mistake, one lie, one hint that you're using us again, and you're out. Do you understand?" He looked at me like I'd slapped him, and maybe I had. Maybe that's exactly what he needed. "I understand," he whispered. "Good. Now your father is going to come out here any minute, and when he sees you, his heart is going to break all over again. But this time, from hope. That hope is going to kill him if you disappoint him one more time. So you're going to be on your best behavior. You're going to get a job. Any job. You're going to contribute to this household. You're going to see a therapist about whatever demons drove you to this. And you're going to earn back what you stole, $1 at a time, for however many years it takes. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Marcus?" I reached across the table and gripped his hand. Not gently, not with motherly tenderness, but with the strength of someone who'd survived being broken. "If you ever hurt your father again, you won't have to worry about bad people coming after you, because I will become the worst thing you've ever faced. I promise you that." He looked into my eyes and saw something there that made him go pale. He nodded slowly, understanding that the woman sitting across from him was capable of things the old Imani would have never dreamed of. At that moment, I heard Robert's footsteps in the hallway. I released Marcus's hand and stood up, smoothing my shirt, preparing myself to watch my husband's face light up with hope I knew would probably destroy him. But this time, I was ready to catch the pieces when everything fell apart again. Robert appeared in the doorway and froze. For a moment, time stopped completely. Father and son stared at each other across the kitchen. 18 months of absence, of betrayal, of grief hanging between them like smoke. "Marcus?" Robert's voice broke on the name. His hand went to his chest, an unconscious gesture he'd developed since the heart attack, as if checking that his heart was still there, still beating, still capable of feeling anything at all. "Dad." Marcus stood up, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I watched Robert's face cycle through a dozen emotions in seconds: shock, joy, rage, relief, pain. His eyes filled with tears, and I saw him waver, saw the moment when love almost won over hurt. Almost. "You broke us," Robert said quietly, his voice shaking. "You broke your mother. You broke our marriage. You broke me." He touched his chest again. "My heart stopped working right because of what you did. The doctors fixed the physical part, but the rest," he trailed off, unable to finish. Marcus took a step forward, hands outstretched. I know what I did. I hate myself for it. If I could go back, but you can't." Robert's voice turned hard, a tone I'd rarely heard from my gentle husband. "You can't go back. You can't undo it. You can't give us back those 18 months of hell. You can't give me back my health, or my job, or the man I used to be. I want to make it right. Please, Dad. Give me a chance to make it right." Robert looked at me then, and I saw the question in his eyes. What do we do? How do we survive this? I gave him the smallest nod, permission to feel whatever he needed to feel. He turned back to Marcus, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. "You can stay, but I don't trust you anymore, son. I don't know if I ever will again. You'll sleep in your old room, you'll find work, you'll help your mother. And maybe, if you prove yourself over time, I'll be able to look at you without feeling this." He pressed his fist against his chest. "This pain." Marcus nodded frantically. "I will. I promise. I'll prove it to you. Both of you." Robert didn't embrace him, didn't touch him. He just walked past Marcus to the back door and stepped outside into the darkness. I heard him crying, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal and wounded. I looked at Marcus. "Go to your room. Unpack. Tomorrow we'll talk about job applications and rules. Tonight, you let your father grieve." After Marcus disappeared down the hallway, I went outside to Robert. He was sitting on the back porch steps, his head in his hands, his body shaking. I sat beside him and put my arm around his shoulders. "I wanted to hate him," Robert whispered. "I wanted to tell him to leave and never come back. But when I saw his face, all I could think was, that's my boy. That's my son. How do I stop loving him? How do I just turn it off?" "You don't," I said softly. "But you don't have to trust him either. Love and trust are different things. He has to earn one back. The other, that's up to your heart." We sat there in the darkness for a long time, holding each other, two old people trying to figure out how to survive being broken by the person they'd loved most in the world. Inside the house, I knew Marcus was unpacking that garbage bag, settling back into the room he'd abandoned. And I knew that the real test was just beginning. Because forgiveness is easy when someone is desperate. The question is, what happens when they're not desperate anymore? Marcus tried. For 3 months, he really tried. He got a job at a warehouse, loading trucks for minimum wage. He came home exhausted every night, handed me half his paycheck without being asked, ate dinner quietly, and went to his room. He was polite, helpful, careful. He walked on eggshells in his own home, and I watched him without sympathy. Robert softened slightly. Not much, but enough that they could sit in the same room without the air feeling like broken glass. They'd watch television together sometimes, father and son separated by 3 feet of couch that might as well have been an ocean. I remained cold, watchful, waiting for the other shoe to drop, because people like Marcus, People who take the easy way, who run when things get hard, they don't change in 3 months. They just learn to hide better. I was right. It started small. A $20 bill missing from my purse. I didn't say anything, just watched. Then Robert's wallet was lighter than it should have been. Small amounts we might not notice if we weren't paying attention. But I was always paying attention now. I found the evidence 3 weeks later. Marcus had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. A text notification lit up the screen. "When are you getting the rest? People are getting impatient." My blood ran cold. I picked up that phone and scrolled through messages I had no legal right to read, but every moral justification to see. He'd been stealing from us again. Smaller amounts this time, more careful, but stealing nonetheless. He owed money to the same people he'd owed it to before. He'd used our $43,000 to pay off part of his debt, but not all of it, and now they wanted the rest. He was using us. Again, just like I'd known he would. I took screenshots, sent them to my own phone, deleted the evidence of my snooping, and I waited. That night at dinner, I put Marcus's phone on the table between us. Robert looked confused. Marcus went pale. "Marcus," I said calmly, "tell your father why you really came back." "Mom, Tell him. Tell him about the people texting you. Tell him about the money you've been taking from us again. Tell him the truth for once in your miserable life." Robert looked between us, his face crumpling. "Marcus? What is she talking about?" Marcus tried to lie. I showed Robert the screenshots. I watched my husband's face go from confusion to understanding to something that looked like death. His hand went to his chest, and I moved quickly, putting my body between him and Marcus. "Get out," Robert whispered. "Get out of my house. Dad, please, get out." Robert's voice was a roar that came from somewhere deep and wounded. "You don't get to do this again. You don't get to kill me twice." Marcus left that night. No arguments, no begging. He just packed his garbage bag and walked out our door for the second and final time. Robert collapsed into his chair, and I held him while he cried. "Why?" he kept asking. "Why does he keep hurting us?" I had no answer except this: because we kept letting him. 2 years passed. We didn't hear from Marcus. We learned later through my sister that he'd fallen deeper. Lost jobs, burned bridges, alienated everyone who'd ever tried to help him. The people he owed money to found him eventually. He spent 6 months in the hospital after they finished with him. No one visited except my sister, who reported back to me with sadness in her voice. I felt nothing. That's what happens when you grieve someone while they're still alive. By the time the real consequences come, you've already buried them in your heart. Another year passed, and my sister called again. "Imani, you need to know. Marcus is in a state-run facility now, mental health crisis. He's not doing well. He keeps asking for you." "Tell him I died," I said, and hung up. Robert had another heart attack that winter. This time, I wasn't there to call the ambulance. He died in his sleep, peacefully, with that photograph of the 3 of us on the nightstand beside him. In the end, my gentle husband had taken it back out of the drawer. He'd spent his last days looking at the family we used to be. At the funeral, Marcus appeared, thin, shaking, barely recognizable. He stood at the back of the church, not daring to approach the casket. After everyone left, I found him sitting in the last pew, crying. "You killed him," I said, not with anger, just stating fact. Maybe not directly, but every broken promise, every lie, every betrayal, they added up. They broke his heart, and eventually, broken hearts stopped beating. Marcus looked up at me with hollow eyes. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know you are. I believe you. But sorry doesn't bring him back, does it?" He shook his head, and I saw what karma had done to him. Life had collected its debt. He'd lost everything: his family, his health, his dignity, his future. He was 41 years old and looked 60. The world had been his teacher, and the lessons had been brutal. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said softly. "I hope you find peace someday. I really do. But you won't find it with me." I walked away from my son for the last time, not with hatred, not with satisfaction, just with the quiet acceptance that some people are meant to teach us what we deserve, and sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who suffer most in the end. Life always keeps its score. I'm 70 years old now. I live alone in a smaller house, surrounded by photographs. But not that one from Marcus's graduation. That one I finally put away for good, after Robert died. Some memories aren't meant to be displayed. They're meant to be learned from. I still work part-time at the nursing home. Not because I have to anymore. Robert's life insurance and my savings have given me enough to live simply, but because I need to. Those elderly patients teach me something new every day about resilience, about grace, about how to carry pain without letting it destroy you. Last month, my sister called to tell me that Marcus finally got clean. He's living in a group home, working at a grocery store, attending meetings. He's 52 now and starting over like a teenager. She says he asks about me sometimes, wonders if I ever think about him. I do think about him. Not with anger anymore. Not even with sadness, really. Just with the quiet understanding that some people come into our lives to break us open, to teach us lessons we never wanted to learn. Marcus taught me that love without boundaries is not love. It's enabling. He taught me that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. He taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Do I regret the years I spent believing he would change? Sometimes, but mostly, I'm grateful for what those years taught me about my own strength. I survived betrayal. I survived loss. I survived watching the two men I loved most destroy each other while I stood helpless in the middle. And I'm still here, still standing, still finding reasons to smile, to laugh, to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. People ask me sometimes if I hate my son. I don't. Hate requires energy I don't have anymore. What I feel is something closer to peace. The peace that comes from finally accepting that you can't save people who don't want to be saved, that you can't love someone into being who you need them to be. I keep a different photograph on my nightstand now. It's just Robert and me on our wedding day, 44 years ago, young and hopeful and unbroken. That's who I choose to remember. Not the people we became after the betrayal, but the people we were when love still felt simple and safe. If my story helps one woman open her eyes, if it helps one mother understand that setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel, it makes you wise, then sharing this pain was worth it. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and turn on the bell to hear more stories of women who turned pain into wisdom. Every day, one woman, one life lesson. Share this story with someone you love. Sometimes, one story can change an entire day. God bless you, and see you next time.